Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Sierzega. First of all, thank you, Chris, for inviting me to talk tonight. I'm excited. This Zoom format is not as good as the real thing, but sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear. I got a little toddler who's yelling my name in the background right there. Anyway, thanks again for Chris for inviting me here. I work for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. I'm a field biologist and the Southern Illinois field representative for the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission. I cover the southern 10 counties in Illinois, so I have quite a big range down here. And tonight, I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about INPC, what INPC is, and how we go about protecting natural areas, both on public lands and the focus of tonight's talk, which will be on private lands. So thank you all for joining. And if you have any questions, feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll get to that at the end, or we'll have a discussion or question and answer if you want at the end as well. So, okay, hopefully there's not a delay in my slides, but we will find out. Okay. So INPC, the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, overall goal and mission is to assist landowners to protect their high quality natural areas as well as these habitats for threatened and endangered species in perpetuity. We do this via voluntary dedication as a nature preserve or registration as a land and water reserve in the Illinois Nature Preserve system. So the way I like to look at the overall mission is that we identify high quality natural areas, we work to protect them. Once they're protected, then we work to steward them and improve them. And if we have any issues come up, we also defend them. So what's so unique about INPC is it was actually the first of its kind in the country and potentially as well in the world. Enacted in 1963, the basic law that governs all of our land protection in INPC, known as the Illinois Natural Areas Preservation Act, came into fruition. And via this law, there is now legal protection of natural lands, and currently in 2020, it's still the strongest legal protection for natural lands that we have within the state. So this allowed us to, INPC, to foster a relationship between public and private landowners of high quality natural areas, and to protect and defend these what's left of Illinois' natural treasures. So the reason why this became such a concern in the late 1960s is because prior to that, over the last 150 years or so, natural lands are disappearing at such an unprecedented rate that the fear was that our heritage would be gone forever. And the current statistic is that there's still less than 1% of natural high quality lands remaining in the entirety of the state. So this was kind of a way to go about the start of protecting these lands, protecting our heritage. So us as in our current time could see the way the Illinois landscape was prior to European settlement. Okay, so INPC, the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, consists of 9 governor-appointed scientists and experts in their fields. And this group, they serve as volunteers to uphold the protection of the natural lands and enforce the Illinois Natural Areas Preservation Act. So what makes INPC so unique is that it's a non-governmental organization, and INPC holds the dedication or the easement on these properties. So the property still maintains, the landowner still maintains ownership of them, be it state or be it a private landowner. However, what they do on the land is dictated in accordance to the rules for nature preserves and land and water reserve management. So what's great about having INPC as non-governmental is that this prevents conflicts of interest with management and any other issues that might arise. So the INPC meets 3 times a year, and during these meetings, myself as a field representative, as well as my other 8 field representative colleagues throughout the state, present new proposals for land protections. We go over defense issues, things like that. So Illinois is an extremely biodiverse state, as you guys all know. There's a very large latitudinal gradient. The glaciated areas in northern Illinois, where I grew up, and then all the way down here in southern Illinois, where the glaciation stops. And down here, especially in southern Illinois, where we have these four ecoregions really coming together, we have the influence of the coastal plain and the southern swamps coming up here. We have the influence of the Appalachian forest coming in from the east. We have the Missouri Ozarks creeping in on the west side of the state. So this creates an extremely biodiverse region of the state. And as such, that creates a lot of high quality natural areas and natural communities. So during the time frame from 1963 to maybe a decade or so after that, there are quite a few nature reserves dedicated, and these were natural areas that were well known and were, I guess, quite easy pickings to be dedicated. And that was proving so successful that around 1975, these scientists, they thought, well, if we found these high quality natural areas, or if we've protected the ones we know of, then maybe we need to go out and locate all of the ones that we don't know of. So that began the start of a 3-year process known as the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, in which these scientists went around the state on both public and private land ownerships to locate high quality natural communities, habitats where there might be rare or endangered species, relic species, geological features, and things like that. And what they found was that the diversity, again, in Illinois is outstanding, and they categorized nearly or greater than 100 natural communities. So that gave the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission and us as field staff a starting point for where to focus our efforts for land protection. So that created a criteria, and within this criteria, we had those Illinois Natural Areas Inventory sites. So that's kind of our governing, our go-to for working on land protection. These sites that were previously recognized, as well as recognized throughout the last few decades by field staff, as well as during a more recent update of the INAI that concluded around 2014, 2015. So this largely includes what we call Category 1 sites, which are natural communities of the highest quality, and those are based off of objective such as biodiversity of the natural community, lack of intrusions, lack of exotics, things like that. So basically the cream of the crop for this type of natural community. And again, threatened and endangered species habitats, that's another way we can protect lands in our INPC system via the Illinois Wildlife Action Plan. So sites that have a high number of species in greatest conservation need, as well as areas that are unfragmented habitat blocks. So for example, large areas of contiguous forest that are functioning ecologically and are important to the landscape as a whole. So what is also unique about INPC is that we can preserve and protect these sites regardless of their size. In Lee County, we have a nature preserve that's less than an acre. It's a cemetery prairie. This natural community the criteria requires a much smaller acreage for dedication. But again, it's a very small site, but it's still preserving that important part of our heritage and our history. The largest site that we have is the Cache River down here in Johnson and Pulaski counties. That's essentially a bioreserve where we have nature reserves and reserves throughout it, as well as areas of restoration, areas of tree plantings, places where we're just trying to restore the contiguity of the landscape. So within INPC, we have two levels of permanent land protection. We have the nature preserve, which is the strongest land protection, and you can picture a preserve as more or less pure preservation. So there are very few additional allowable uses. The main goal is to protect and restore and steward these lands. Around the late 1990s, the Land and Water Reserve came into fruition, and this is a more of a typical conservation easement where we're protecting the natural qualities of the land, but we're also allowing the landowners a bit more flexibility in their land usage and reserved rights. And as of now, we have over 600 sites protected in INPC system throughout the state, totaling over 115,000 acres of permanently protected habitat. This image here is an image of the high quality grade B cypress tubalo swamp down in Round Pond Nature Preserve, which is down in southern Polk County. And I worked with Illinois Audubon Society to recently dedicate this property. And to the north, TNC owns a 200 plus acre preserve as well. So as a whole, that's almost a 600 acre nature preserve now protecting this high quality swamp. So public nature preserves, I'm sure a lot of you all have been to quite a few of these. Cave Creek Glade, for example. This is an example of protecting a grade A high quality natural community. This is a grade A limestone glade. There are also some T&E plants on it. Round Bluff Nature Preserve, another one of those sites where it's protecting a grade A sandstone glade. And it's also within that sandstone glade, you find the state listed small flower of an hour. So a lot of times these criteria overlap, where if we have a high quality natural community, we're likely to find a threatened or endangered species in it as well. Okay. So on the private side, we have a nature preserve known as Holcim Nature Preserve down in Massac County, and that's owned by American Electric Company. And this was actually the first nature preserve dedicated by a corporation back in the 70s. And this site it's small, it's about 17 acres, and it's set aside specifically to protect the state listed Carolina silverbell or American silverbell. Here's a few species, threatened and endangered species that we, if they're utilizing properties or utilizing these natural areas, that we can protect those sites as well. So for example, yellow-crowned night herons, cerulean warblers, the federally endangered Indiana bat. We have quite a few sites that are bat hibernacula. And then in the bottom right, the spotted dusky salamander. Audubon owns a nature preserve known as Hartman Springs, which is specifically protected for this state listed species. And then another cool, unique way to protect lands, specifically in the Land and Water Reserve program, is through contiguous forest habitat. So if a landowner has over 100 acres of contiguous forest, and that acreage provides habitat, important habitat for breeding songbirds or species in greatest conservation need, just the Kentucky warbler or worm-eating warbler, we can also protect those lands for that reason. Okay, so these next few slides won't be as pretty, they're mostly text, but I think they're important as well. So where do we start as a field representative? Where do I start? So there's a couple strategies to go about this, for where to start to locate, to have landowner contact and discussion for the potential of protecting these lands. So there's the privately owned sites that are identified on the INAI. That's in the past, my predecessor, Judy Faulkner, and a lot of folks in the commission in the past, they would write letters, visit homes, snail mail, ways like that, which I've still done. But now it's a little bit easier. We don't have to go to the courthouse to figure out exactly who owns. Well, in some counties you do. Hardin County, you still need to go to the courthouse to figure out who owns land. But we have more technology now to figure out who owns these INAI sites. We have updated ArcGIS county maps. That OnX app is extremely useful for locating property ownership as well. So that's one way to go about this land protection, is actually find out who owns these natural or INAI sites that aren't protected, and just going straight to them and beginning that conversation. Um, Sometimes that might work out well, other times you might not get any response. The other way, which seems to happen in a lot more often in my kind of young career here, is opportunistic encounters with landowners. So there might be a landowner who works with another division. Maybe they're in Acres for Wildlife, and they've expressed that they care deeply for their land and they want to protect it in perpetuity. Maybe they work with another agency or partner, like Partners for Fish and Wildlife, or something like that. Maybe they're a neighboring landowner of an INPC site or of a nature preserve. Maybe we just meet at a meeting like this or something like that. Maybe the landowner owns one site that's protected, and they are have had a very positive experience with INPC, so they'd like to protect another one. Or maybe a landowner sees, again, a presentation like this, or maybe something in one of our articles or whatnot, and they reach out directly to INPC in Springfield or to myself in regards to the potential of protecting their land. And I really enjoyed this process as well, because you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes, you meet extremely passionate people who have great land, but unfortunately they won't qualify for my criteria. Other times you might have somebody who has a site that I walk out there and I say, wow, this has got to be one of the highest quality floodplain forests I've seen down here in the state, or whatnot. And those sites exist. It's impossible for all those folks who did the INAI to find every single high quality site. So it's great to go out to these and find areas that just blow my mind because they haven't been disturbed in over 100 years. Another unique way to help these landowners with protecting their land, especially if they own large tracts of land, is again that use of contiguous habitat. So if they own lands that are over 100 acres of contiguous forest, we have some other criteria with wetlands and grasslands as well, but we don't deal as much with grasslands down here. But so, for example, with the forest habitat, if they have over 100 acres of forest, and it's biologically important for breeding bird species as well as migratory stopover habitat, which is likely the case in Southern Illinois, then I can work with them to work towards land and water reserve registration. And this is great too, because then I can start working with the preserve and reserve design. So sometimes we have sites that have two nature preserves near each other, but there's an opening between them. So you can ideally work to protect the land in between that as well, to make a larger, more contiguous preserve or reserve. Okay, so now what? So you talk to these landowners. You really need to gauge what's their vision for the property, what they like out of the property, and does it align with that of INPC? Do they understand that if you're protecting this in perpetuity, that's going to change their usage of the land? Do the intended heirs, like for example their children, do they have an interest in the property? I run into this a lot, where it seems like the landowners really interested in protecting it, but maybe their children might not have the same idea. So that might be a potential hurdle to overcome. And then with that said, you have to evaluate, is it the right time for this, or should I kind of leave this one for a little bit and then come back to this landowner in a couple of years? But when you do meet those landowners who are ready to go, it's fantastic, and it's inspiring. And the first thing you want to go about telling them, which I've probably had this discussion with them at this point, but I like to tell them the benefits, and the most important benefit is that this is the strongest land protection available for natural lands in the state of Illinois. So you would hope that that's the main interest of the people that you're working with, is that they share that same goal of just protecting that habitat. And other benefits is that these dedication or registration will protect against new right-of-ways, development within these sites. It's an insurance that your property will remain in its natural state in perpetuity. And then there's a few other benefits. There's some tax benefits. Then once sites are registered or dedicated, it allows staff, myself, as well as District of Division of Natural Heritage staff, to put our time and effort into these sites. If there are issues with that require defensible actions, such as if it's a wetland and you have a neighbor attempting to drain it, if it's a protected site, now we can enforce offenses against that under the Natural Areas Preservation Act. And then another big important benefit is that when a site's protected, it now opens it up to natural areas acquisition funding stewardship. So I can write grants and apply for grants to restore these lands. So it's not just myself and fellow field staff doing it. We can also get contractors out there to improve these habitats as well. Quite a few logistics go in. I won't bore you with all this stuff, but a lot of logistics go in before we can actually make this dedication or registration a reality. We do title searches. We need to do boundary surveys. A lot of times we need to do boundary exclusions. We need to go over reserved rights with landowners, allowable uses. Then we write up a big proposal, which eventually present towards the commission, whom I had discussed earlier, and they give it the yay or the nay. But the logistics continue on and on. So it's quite a process from start to finish to get this done. But when it is done, it's incredibly rewarding to think that we've now protected this land. We've done something for this natural land that's going to outlive myself, outlive the landowner, and outlive everyone in this conversation right now. So it's very rewarding position. Okay, so for the last part of my talk, I'm going to go over two private landowners that I've worked closely with during my time with INPC, where we've had extremely positive relationships. I consider these highly successful, so I'd like to share them with you. The first is over in Hardin County, really close to Cave and Rock. There's a mining corporation over there known as LaFarge Holcim, and they own quite a bit of land, and a lot of this land contains high quality limestone glade natural communities. Back in it was around 2010, between 2010 to 2014, one of the INAI sites over there, the Collier Limestone Glade, INAI site was protected as a private nature preserve, part of it by LaFarge, as well as a state-owned IDNR nature preserve, which is now the Collier Limestone Glade Nature Preserve. So that's a really unique site, in which it's about 120 acre site, and it's split 50-50 down the middle, private ownership with a corporation who voluntarily dedicated their land to be protected, and state ownership with IDNR. And then more recently, in January 2018, I permanently registered LaFarge Barker Bluff, which is another grade A limestone glade natural community site, a couple miles west of Collier. So this site, it was quite a learning experience for me. Parts of Barker Bluff, I looked at the original INAI from 1978, and these areas were considered grade A limestone glade. And when you see a limestone glade, you expect something like Wildcat Bluff or Cave Creek, where you see forbs everywhere and grass and forest diversity, open areas. And what I found for the grade A glade was this. You can see, if you put your historic lens on and you try to look back 40 or 50 years, when all these cedars and a lot of these dead little trees weren't in here, you can see these big sprawling chinkapins, and that's probably what it looked like in the past. Big sprawling chinkapin oaks without these little cedar poles on it. So now with this kind of formally being in my site to steward and to restore, I thought, well, we better get started on restoration in these areas. So we did some work. We worked hard to restore the glades and barrens and woodlands at these sites. We did quite a few work days. We even got an AmeriCorps conservation team out there to help us cut cedars. And we cut, over a couple of years, we cut almost all the cedars out of these glades. We did exotics control. We did woody invasives control, prescribed fire, and we also used natural areas acquisition funds, and I most recently had a contract done to start kind of thinning the mid-story a little bit more on the south-facing slope. The moral of the story is we started working hard to restore the site. We had it protected. The next goal was to improve it. Another image of prescribed fire out there. And the results were phenomenal. The first year or two, we kind of had that typical response of weedy species, a lot of pokeweed coming in, foxtail, flower, things that weren't super conservative, a lot of woodland sunflower. But by year 3, all of a sudden there were quite a lot more conservative species coming up, liatrous species, pencil flower, hoary puccoon, flower, marble seed, all kinds of plants that you didn't even know were there until we got rid of those cedars and started burning it. So a very cool success story to share. Okay, and then the second example that I will go over is in Williamson County, and this is specifically with a landowner who grew up there. He's in his 70s now, but he grew up in the area, traveled the world, really unique, fantastic person. And as of recently, he's been acquiring a lot of land in the area where he grew up because he wants to protect it and he wants to keep it in the way that it was historically. And I've never seen someone work harder than this guy. He's constantly out 12 hours a day, cutting autumn olive, planting acorns, trying to restore all these old fields to oak forests and flatwoods of what they once were. So in 2014, so this was before my time, one of my colleagues who's since retired, he worked with this landowner to dedicate about 34 acres of old growth white oak and red oak timber in Williamson County. They cored one of the snags down here and got about to 250 rings before they hit the hollow center. So it's very likely that these trees, which stand well over 120 tall, are probably the old white oak, standing white oak timber stand left in the county. And for that reason, this site is now a grade B dry mesic upland forest and is the only of its quality and its kind in Williamson County. And this became the first nature preserve within this county. Last year in 2019, I worked very closely with this landowner to protect a additional 110 acres of this property just up the road. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer here, but the circle is his old growth timber nature preserve, and just north is his land and water reserve. This is an image from 1938 right here, so you can see his nature preserve was still wooded. But this land and water reserve, the rectangular outline, there's also that habitat, though not as high quality as the nature preserve, still possesses qualities of 80 to 100 years past. But I worked with him to protect this land to create the start of a bioreserve within this area. So again, he owns quite a few parcels in here, and through our discussions and our talks, our ultimate goals are shared, which are to continue to add more and more acreage and land to this area and create something that doesn't exist in Williamson County, which is a network of protected lands. So within this reserve, he had upland, a diversity of habitat. He had uplands, bottomlands, some really nice timbers in there. And another qualifying feature to protect his site was that he has barn owls nesting, and he's had barn owls nesting on that property since 2012. Another fun, unique thing to add in is that last week, we actually went and put another 4 additional barn owl boxes throughout some of his other properties to the north. These are some CRP fields that are pretty open and provide some good habitat for these species. So we're hoping that we'll either get barn owl family groups nesting in them, or maybe some other individuals as well. There's also Chuck Will's widows in the area, and it provides this reserve, as well as his surrounding land that he owns, provides breeding habitat for many species in greatest conservation. A few here, such as prairie warbler and yellow-breasted chat. Quite a few migratory forest breeders and greatest need of conservation: Kentucky warblers, wood thrush, yellow-billed cuckoos, and then some resident species such as brown thrashers, red-headed woodpeckers. And then finally, so my training prior to taking this position was in ecology, and specifically in ornithology. So I'm a bird person, and what I really like when I look at lands, I don't like thinking of them just in a single season, like what happens during the breeding season. I like thinking of what happens throughout the year. So how will this site provide habitat for wintering species? How will this site provide migratory stopover habitat? Things like that. So this site is important for bay-breasted warblers, which are a declining species, which we found migrating through here multiple years in a row. Rusty blackbirds, which is a species that's been declining precipitously over recent decades, and we still don't know why, but on any given day during the winter, we can see a couple hundred of these species flocking out in this property. So again, it's the start of creating a network of protected habitat for the entire ecological system. And then just some more bird pictures here. These habitats also provide habitat for forest-sensitive breeding species such as scarlet tanagers and Louisiana water thrushes. And then finally, here's another image. His reserve is kind of in the center, on the south part of the page here, but in these open fields in the center of the center of the screen here, these are some CRP fields. He has in the past, about, I think it was in 2014, he flushed a black rail, which is now under review by Fish and Wildlife Service to be a federally listed species. Actually, the action might have been passed. I can't recall, but as recently as a week and a half ago, when he was out working in this field, the same thing happened, where again, this year in 2020, he flushed another black rail. He flushes yellow rails out of there almost every single year, and short-eared owls also use this habitat. So again, we're looking at how to protect this land in a landscape scale, as well as protecting these high-quality natural communities, seeing how everything fits in together. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.